Respectfully, Brittney Griner was in a Russian prison. You would think that somebody who is now free, back in America on home soil, would not have too much to complain about.
Brittney Griner just had a complete breakdown following Stephen A. Smith completely destroyed her for her decision to racial remarks directed at Caitlin Clark, the Russian prisoner who survived, believed she could use race as an argument against the crowd noise. But Stephen A. brought up the topic of an unsettling fact that she apparently forgot how brutal the comeback was, that Griner lost her mind completely, which was more humiliating for Griner to receive criticized for her racial remarks or having Stephen A. remind her about the Brittney Griner's rescue from a Russian prison just underwent the most widespread humiliation of her entire career, and it's absolutely beautiful to watch after. Making comments that are completely subdued about racial undertones and crowd reactions during WNBA games, Stephen A. Smith decided to deliver a reality check that sent Griner completely into a tailspin. The subsequent meltdown was so remarkable enough to merit its own highlight reel.
Yeah, she says right there, watch this. Every time we play her, there's this commotion, like this loud rumbling from the stands. Turns out it's people, thousands of them, just sitting there watching on purpose. It's very disruptive. She says WNBA games used to be a chill, quiet place. You could bring your laptop and relax, maybe even get a little work done. But now it's like there's large gatherings of people watching us from the stands. Some of them are yelling crazy shit about what they're seeing, putting unfair pressure on us to score, like we're there for their entertainment. You are. The whole thing is toxic. I saw a guy with his daughter in the crowd, both of them yelling, couldn't hear what they were saying exactly, but it was either my performance or some light racism.
However, let's begin with what here actually happened, because the sequence of events is crucial to understanding why Griner's response was so out of control. During a recent interview, Griner complained about the increased number of people, Caitlin's fan engagement, and noise Clark brought her to the WNBA. Specifically mentioned seeing a father with her daughter cheering from the stands, and hypothesized that their enthusiasm was either pertaining to her performance or some light racism, or the term light racism is set things into motion. Griner used it to describe the excitement of fans regarding basketball games. Think about that for a second. An elite athlete examined cheering people on at sporting events and immediately assumed racial motives. That high level of fear and victim mentality is exactly what Stephen A. Smith couldn't let slide.
Respectfully, Brittney Griner was in a Russian prison. You would think that somebody who is now free, back in America on home soil, would not have too much to complain about. Especially something like this. Fans in every sport. She described the fans.
Yeah.
When Stephen A. discovered Griner's remarks were forthright, he emphasized to everyone that Griner literally freed from a prison in Russia recently by means of a prisoner exchange in which Victor was released against a dealer in arms known as Merchant of Death, found guilty of conspiracy against the U.S. to kill Americans. The government of a state traded a convicted terrorist in order to bring Griner and her home. Complaining about freedom is a response to crowd noise.
And when you clearly she's not remembering who they let out to get her back.
The Merchant of Death.
The Merchant of Death. An arms dealer that wanted to kill American citizens, according to the reports. That's who they let out. For her.
The comparison Stephen A. made was absolutely devastating. Here's someone who has had actual restrictions on freedom from oppression, actual repercussions of her actions, and she's using that platform to complain about the enthusiasm of Americans during games of basketball. At the level of apathy and indifference were so blatant that even Griner's backers, she was unable to defend her position. But here's where Griner's response evolved, completely disoriented as opposed to acknowledging that valid point Stephen A. raised or in any way expressing gratitude to her situation, she doubled down on the victim narrative and began to assault Stephan. Personally, she accused him of not understanding her experience, dismissed his analysis as ignorant, and basically suffered a public meltdown as a result of a dare to question her worldview.
Prices, insane. Let me read you the ticket prices. After Caitlin Clark's been hurt for 2 weeks. All right, so let's go through this. Caitlin Clark absence is having an immediate impact beyond the court. According to data shared by Yahoo Sports via TickPick, prices for two specific Indiana Fever away games against the Chicago Sky and the Washington Mystics dropped.
Gurrier's response is a wonderful example of irony. Although the prison rescue angle was undoubtedly the most brutal part of Stephen A.'s commentary, he also pointed out how Gurrier's complaints reveal a fundamental misunderstanding of what professional sports entertainment is supposed to be. Fans don't pay money to sit quietly and politely applaud. They paid to express their emotions. She complained about crowd noise interfering with her ability to play basketball, but she then created far more noise and distraction through her own comments and subsequent meltdown than any crowd could ever do. Encourage outstanding plays and set the mood. Gurrier's disconnection from the realities of professional sports is demonstrated by the fact that she found crowd enthusiasm disruptive. While players in other sports capitalize on crowd energy to improve their performances, Gurrier was viewing fan interaction as a hassle rather than a chance to demonstrate her skills on a larger platform. Gurrier's breakdown also demonstrated how unprepared some WNBA players were for public recognition. For 25 years, they lived in a cocoon with little to no criticism. There were little expectations and almost any accountability. When Caitlin Clark arrived, there was intense scrutiny, genuine performance pressure, and consequences, and it was obvious that some players weren't prepared for that change. The racial component of Gurrier's initial remarks was especially troubling because it presumed the worst from basketball fans who were just passionate about the sport. The idea that father-daughter pairs cheering at games must be practicing racism demonstrates a mindset that actively seeks out issues rather than seizing opportunities. Stephen A. did not let it to pass either. He emphasized the dangers of prominent figures carelessly making accusations of racism without providing any supporting information or context. This lessens the impact of addressing real racial issues and fosters division where none should be. The outburst that ensued was precisely the type of careless speech that Stephen A. has dedicated his career to combating. Gurrier's casual use of light racism to characterize crowd noise. As one might anticipate from someone who has never been held responsible for their words, Stephen A.'s criticism was spot on. Gurrier posted numerous defensive messages on social media, essentially confirming all of the criticisms leveled at her mindset and professional sports style rather than. In light of the legitimate concerns expressed, Gurrier attacked the messenger and played victim. What made her outburst even more embarrassing was that it occurred at a time when the WNBA is seeing historically high levels of popularity and income, largely as a result of Caitlin Clark's influence, rather than seizing the chance that comes with more attention. The prison rescue angle that Stephen A. brought up was especially effective because it brought to light the stark contrast between Gurrier's experience behind bars and her current complaints about American basketball fans. Someone who truly understood what she went through should be celebrating every moment of freedom, every opportunity to compete, and every fan who chooses to spend money watching her play. Gurrier's inability to express gratitude for her rescue and return to professional basketball reveals a level of entitlement that is truly shocking. The U.S. government literally negotiated with terrorists to secure her freedom, and her response is to complain. Regarding the volume of noise at basketball games, such viewpoint demonstrates how detached she has gotten from reality. The outburst also revealed Gurrier's true thinness in response to valid criticism. Stephen A. pointed out that players in the NBA, NFL, MLB, and NHL all deal with hostile road environments and fervent fans as part of their job. No other professional athlete complains about crowd noise the way Griner did, which makes her comments seem even more out of touch. Stephen A. wasn't attacking her personally or making unfair accusations. Rather, he was pointing out objective facts about her situation and challenging her complaints with reasonable counterarguments. Instead of engaging with those points, Griner responded emotionally and defensively. The fact that Stephen A. wasn't the only one who criticized Griner made matters worse. Her statements and manner were questioned by other media figures, past players, and even some current WNBA players. The ensuing collapse revealed that she was ill-equipped to deal with the extensive criticism of her victim mentality and the racial issues that Griner's attempts to enter the conversation were especially troublesome because they diverted attention from appropriate conversations about the WNBA's expansion and success. Rather than praising the league's increasing income and fan involvement, she was searching for issues and complaints where none existed. Stephen A.'s response to Griner's meltdown was ideal because he didn't back down or apologize for raising legitimate concerns. Instead, he intensified his analysis and gave additional context for why her complaints were so tone-deaf. This type of constant communication made Griner face the flaws in her argument rather than retreating into victim narratives. The WNBA community as a whole responded to this entire situation by stating that the majority of players and coaches chose to remain silent rather than defend Griner's remarks, indicating that they understood how problematic her position was. Her peers also acknowledged that she had gone too far, as evidenced by their lack of support for her racial accusation. Additionally, Griner's outburst made clear the distinction between genuine criticism and made-up complaints. Griner was causing problems where none existed, whereas Stephen A. was addressing actual concerns with her remarks and methodology. The timing of this entire issue was especially unfortunate for Griner because it took place at a time when the WNBA sorely needed positive publicity and mainstream recognition. The difference between substantive analysis and emotional reaction was evident to everyone watching. Her grievances over fan interaction and unfounded claims of racism were precisely the kind of vitriol that may alienate the casual fans the league needs to keep growing. The larger topic of athlete accountability in the social media era was also covered in Stephen A's analysis. Griner's remarks weren't made in a private conversation. Rather, they were public declarations that merited public scrutiny, and the fact that she broke down in the face of it demonstrates how ill-prepared she was for the fallout from her. Stephen A's constant emphasis on the prison rescue context was especially powerful because it gave a tangible illustration of the support Griner had received from the nation she was now criticizing. The contrast between international diplomacy securing her freedom and her grievances about domestic basketball fans was obvious and striking. Griner's response also demonstrated how social media can intensify and prolong disputes that might have ended swiftly in the past. Rather than allowing Stephen A's criticism to fade away, her defensive posts and emotional responses kept the story going and made her appear worse with each new remark. The most destructive part of Griner's meltdown was how it reinforced all the unfavorable stereotypes about entitled athletes who are incapable of taking criticism. Rather than demonstrating maturity, accountability, or perspective, she resorted to victim narratives and attacked anyone who disagreed with her strategy. Throughout this issue, Stephen A's constant messaging was especially successful since he avoided personal assaults in favor of facts and unbiased analysis. He gave background that made Griner's perspective appear even more irrational while letting her own words and responses speak for itself. The wider ramifications of this dispute go beyond the remarks made by a single player. It brought to light the conflict between the WNBA's aspiration for widespread recognition and certain players' comfort level in low-pressure, low-stakes settings. The collapse also demonstrated how unprepared some players are for the kind of scrutiny that comes with true popularity and cultural importance. Griner's comments exemplified the exact mentality that kept the league obsolete for 25 years. While Griner's response revealed the opposite strategy, defensive, emotional, and unproductive, Caitlin Clark has shown how to deal with pressure and criticism effectively. What made Griner's response even more embarrassing was that, by having a meltdown, she sparked a far larger controversy than Stephen A's initial criticism would have. Had she just ignored the remarks or responded professionally, the story would have swiftly vanished, but instead her emotional outburst turned it into a multiple-day news cycle. The most satisfying part of this whole situation was watching someone finally hold Griner accountable for tone-deaf comments without backing down when she tried to play victim. Stephen A refused to let her hide behind racial grievances or defensive deflection, forcing her to confront the weakness of her actual arguments. Because of Guerrier's inability to show appropriate gratitude and perspective, the prison rescue angle will likely follow her for the rest of her career. Guerrier's breakdown essentially supported everything Stephen A. said about her mindset and professional sports style. Rather than exhibiting growth, accountability, or perspective, she reaffirmed that she is the type of entitled athlete who laments her accomplishments rather than seizing opportunities. The controversy's long-term effects will likely be that Guerrier is remembered more for her incapacity to take criticism than for any of her basketball accomplishments. Her outburst eclipsed any constructive contributions she might have made to the sport and made her known as someone who causes issues rather than finding solutions. Brittney Griner just discovered why it's never a good idea to play victim to Stephen Smith. Her racist remarks backfired badly, and the ensuing tantrum was hilarious. Click like if you agree with Stephen A. and subscribe for more accountability moments. The Russian jail rescue angle was nasty, but very essential.